Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today we are going to talk about what makes a 5-star read for me. You might know if you're here a lot that I am pretty stingy with my 5-star ratings. I'm trying to get better at it, but I would say that on average, maybe about 10% of the books that I read are 5-star reads for me, which I actually think is not that bad because I read a lot of different things and a lot of different genres, and I'm kind of like all over the place, so that actually makes a lot of sense to me. I also sometimes feel like the more I read, the harder I am to impress in a way because I'm always comparing what I'm reading to everything that I have read. And so this is one of the reasons why I want to get a little bit better at just giving things 5 stars. And obviously, a 5-star rating is very subjective. It's all about what the individual reader likes. So what I've done is that I've taken a look at a lot of the books that I've given 5 stars to and tried to like figure out what the secret ingredients are that seem to really do it for me. Sometimes the book is an outlier and it doesn't really have very much in common with other books that I've read and loved, which is one of the reasons why I read so broadly and so many different things. But for a lot of my 5-star reads, there are clearly some things that just work very well for me and they appear in my 5-star reads again and again and again. And those are the things that we will be talking about today. There are a lot of books, so I won't be going into what each of them are about, but I have reviewed most of these, I think, on this channel, so you're welcome to go search for them if you want to know more. And I have also just included like the top things that seem to appear in my favorites, and we just have to do it this way because otherwise we would be here all day and it would basically just be a favorites video. The first thing that came to mind when I started thinking about this and that I knew was going to be one of these like secret ingredients is a gothic or dark atmosphere. And atmosphere is so important to me when I'm reading a book, and it can come in many forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be gothic or dark, but that's my preference. And if I read a book that has like little to no atmosphere at all, it is very unlikely that I will rate that highly because it's a huge part of the reading experience for me. And I know that not everyone cares about it, but I really do. Like, it's super important. I can see in a lot of my favorites though that if the atmosphere leans more gothic or a little bit darker, I do seem to love that a lot. And I have found several classics that do this really well and that I've loved. For example, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë, which I absolutely loved. And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which has an excellent atmosphere. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I finally read last year or the year before, and I loved it. And then what is maybe my favorite classic, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, has an excellent atmosphere. And all of these books just have the kind of atmosphere that I feel like it blends really well with the characters and the plot, and all of that together just makes it very immersive. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love atmosphere so much, is that that is what makes me feel immersed in a book. And if a book doesn't have that, I just can't get as like into it. I have found this in some more modern books as well though, like Starling House by Alix E. Harrow, which has a very dark and gothic atmosphere, and The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Both of these have that kind of atmosphere that I loved, and both of these books just sucked me right in. I will also include The Lost Man by Jane Harper, which isn't that kind of like gothic atmosphere, but there is a lot of darkness in it in a way because this is a mystery thriller, so obviously something terrible happens in here. And I actually think that this author in particular is one of the authors that I've read that is like the best at creating atmosphere. I think she does it so well in all of her books. It's one of the reasons why I love her. And then I will also mention The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Again, not like super gothic, but I do think the atmosphere is very immersive and I really loved it. This is also a mystery. And I think that both of these are more on the periphery of this whole thing, but both of them do atmosphere really, really well. They're not gothic in the way that the classics are, for instance, but both of these have mysteries and murder in them, which is arguably pretty dark. I also forgot to say earlier, actually, if any of you have any recommendations throughout this video to any of the things that I mentioned, please let me know, because obviously I love these kinds of things and I would like to read more books with these things in them. The second thing that I saw when I looked at a lot of my favorites is not very surprising to me, but it's basically when a bunch of very specific elements are all together in a book. the likelihood that I will enjoy that book is much higher. It's if a book combines adventure with cozy and or whimsical vibes and characters that I adore. And then it gets bonus points if there's a little bit of darkness to the story as well. It doesn't have to be there, but I always like a little bit of darkness in my books, so if that's there as well, it's just a little bit better. A lot of these books are books that I talk about all the time, but they are weirdly difficult to find, and the tone of them have to hit me correctly as well, otherwise I don't enjoy it. But when all of that works together, I just love it. A good example of this is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett, Nettle and Boat by T. Kingfisher, and The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. And all of these three are some of my all-time favorite books, and all of them have a little bit of darkness to them, which I actually think is kind of a difficult thing to do, because combining coziness and darkness, sometimes that can feel really out of place. But when it's done right, like the way it's done in these books, the balance just feels right, and I just love it. I also have Brigands and Breadknives by Travis Baldree, which isn't particularly dark, but there are moments where things get a little bit dicey, but really, like, everyone's gonna be fine in this book, you kind of know that. I also love, as you might know, Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen. Again, not very dark, but it has all of those other elements to it, and it's like a very magical, lovely graphic novel. I am also going to include Miss Benson's Beetle in this, although I don't know if this is really all that cozy. It has some cozy elements to it, but this is more like an adventure, and it's all about like these great characters, and there is some darkness in this as well. It's quite emotional, and I guess it is a little bit whimsical in a way, because suddenly deciding to just travel across the globe to try and find like a beetle that may not exist does have like a level of whimsy to it, I guess. All of these have characters in them though that I absolutely adored, and I am a reader that is like all about the characters. If a book doesn't have a character that I either care about or love or that I find interesting, sometimes I also really like reading about unlikable characters, but if I don't find the character interesting, I'm really not going to care about anything that happens in the book. That's just how it is for me. Like, I really am a reader that's all about the characters, and all of the characters in these books are characters that I just love and I still think about a lot. This next one is a little bit hard to explain, but I've called it A Knife to the Heart with Gorgeous Writing. So these are books that I at least think are gorgeous, and I love the writing in them, but they are like also very painful to read in a way, and I really like that combination, which I don't know what that says about me, but here we are. These are the kinds of books where if I were to recommend them to a friend, I would be like, here you go, this is gonna make you cry. You can thank me later. Now, beautiful writing, what does that even mean? I mean, again, this is very subjective, and I know that what I think is beautiful writing and some of the writing styles that I absolutely love, other people loathe. So this is very, like, specific to me, I think, but for me, a beautiful writing style is usually, not always, but usually it's more on the descriptive side. And again, it has like a focus on the characters. And I think beautiful writing for me in a lot of ways is writing that brings characters to life in a way where they feel like real people. This can work for me in a lot of different genres though. So we have, for example, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, which is historical fiction. We have Call Me By Your Name by Andrea Osman, which is romance. The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow and The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller are both like fantasy romances. And then Fresh Water for Flowers by Valérie Perrin, which is a contemporary book. So these, like this concept of mine can come up in all kinds of different books, but all of these books sort of feel like a gut punch, but in the best way. It has also happened when I'm reading nonfiction, actually, and the best example I have of this is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is probably my favorite memoir that I've ever read. It is heartbreaking, and it's so, like, personal, and I have such a hard time describing this book, but it's beautifully, beautifully written. And all of these books are books that made me feel a lot, and I still, like, if I think of the book, I will feel what the book made me feel again. And again, it's like a mix of beauty and pain in a way that just really appeals to me, and it's very impactful when I read one of these books. I can always remember how a book made me feel, and these books made me feel a lot. And sometimes books don't make me feel anything, and in those cases, I will just forget about those books. Like, I will forget that I've read them. But these are the kinds of books that I will never forget. Next, we have one that will not be a surprise to a lot of you, I think. And I know that this term has kind of like lost all meaning at this point, but it is dark academia with an emphasis on the dark. I know that a lot of books, and I enjoy those books as well, I know a lot of books that are marketed as dark academia. It's only really dark when it comes to the atmosphere or it has like an academic setting. But what I mean is like actual dark academia and actual like dark themes and a dark like, yes, the aesthetic and the atmosphere and the vibe as well, but there has to be more to it. What I interpret dark academia to be, or at least what I like and look for in dark academia books, is sometimes it's about like people pursuing knowledge, and it really, they take it so far that it pushes them to the brink. I think that's really interesting. I also really like themes of power and moral ambiguity, secrets, death, obsession. I really like books about obsession. And I really like when books explore elitism, especially in the context of academia. I just think it's very interesting. I also really love when books have this sort of mix of like beauty and decay, which I think is a thing that pops up in a lot of dark academia books. And it makes a lot of sense to me that I would like that, because I'm interested in both. Like, deep in my heart, I think both of those things are just very, very interesting. A lot of the ones that fit into this that I have given 5 stars to are some of the more renowned dark academia books. So of course we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. If anyone ever asks me what my favorite book is, this is the answer, and I love this book. I know it's not for everyone, but I just think it's so well done, and it's just excellent. I love reading about the characters. They are kind of horrible people, but I love them, and the writing is great. And yeah, I've read this book several times, and I feel like every time I read it, I get something new from it. Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo is another one that I absolutely loved. This is like properly dark. And I know it's too dark for some people, but not for me. I honestly kind of feel like there is not a lot that is too dark for me, but this kind of darkness is just perfect. I love it. This leans more into the supernatural side of things. I also feel like The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova fits into this whole thing. There's a lot of dark academia themes in this. Again, leans more into kind of fantasy. I would say that Ninth House has more fantasy than this, but this has vampires in it. And then Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, I feel like fits into this very well. There is a lot of darkness in trying to actually travel to hell and like survive that. I would also add The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door by H.G. Perry to this. I really like this book, but I do think that it was like the dark academia in combination with other things that made me love this book. This has a lot of the themes of dark academia to it, but I think that this is the one where I feel like it's the one that the most leans into the dark academia aesthetic on purpose. But that can work for me sometimes when it's in combination with other things and like a lot of these themes. And I think one of the reasons why I love this one is also because it combines all of this with like fae and fairies in a way that I just really loved. So I just had to give this 5 stars. But it is an example of how sometimes just the aesthetic as well can work for me, although there is like themes in this as well, but it doesn't have to be as like heavy as these other ones for me to love it. I will say though, I do actually also really like the dark academia aesthetic in books as well, and so if I read on the back of a book that it has like a dark academia setting or there's like the right vibes, I will be interested in reading those books, but a lot of those books end up being like 4-star reads for me if it doesn't have like the themes and the characters in like exactly the way that I love. it's not gonna get 5 stars. But again, I'm very stingy with my 5-star ratings, so for me a 4-star rating is still pretty good. But yeah, it doesn't have to be like this in order for me to enjoy it, but it has to be like this in order for me to give it 5 stars. Like I mentioned though, I'm a reader who is all about the characters in the books that I read. I know some readers are more on like the plot side of things, and sometimes I wish that I could enjoy those kinds of books a little bit more than I do, but I just need to have like an interesting character or a character that I care about in a book for it to make an impact on me. And I will never give a book 5 stars unless I really, really care about the character or there's something about the character that sticks with me. So this next one, I'm just gonna call like character studies. The Secret History, again, is an excellent character study. Again, it's one of the reasons why I love this book so much. And I feel like this is one of those things, again, that can appear in a lot of different genres. I think my favorite classic that has this in it is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, where we meet a lot of different characters and we spend a lot of time with them. This book is really long, so it would be a shame if you read this book and you didn't know the characters at the end of it, but in this one you really get to know them. Intermezzo by Sally Rooney is another one that I absolutely loved because I loved the characters so much, although I know that this writing style doesn't work for everyone. Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is another excellent one. I actually really want to reread this because it's been many years since I read it, but I remember loving it. And then Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata is another great one, although this leans more into like the weird side of things. I also feel like Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng kind of fits into this, even though this is also very much a family drama. And again, The God of the Woods by Liz Moore fits into this. This is like a literary mystery, and I feel like both of these books are good examples of how this can also work in combination with other more like plot-based things. But the whole point is that in both of these books we also delve really deep into the characters. A lot of the books that I read that are like this though, again, are books that end up getting 4 stars for me. Sometimes it's just a little extra something that makes it a 5-star read. And I'm the kind of reader where I like reading about all kinds of different characters. I also like reading about unlikable ones. And I can even like fundamentally and morally disagree with a character that I read about, but if it's done well, I just think it's so interesting. Second to last, we have a section that I'm just gonna call What the Hell? And these are books where when I'm reading these books or when I've finished them, my like feeling that I'll be left with is like, what the hell was that? But in the best possible way. So these are the kinds of books that sort of blow my mind a little bit. A lot of these books are dystopian books actually, or like post-apocalyptic, or they're just a little crazy. And this is one of the reasons why I would say that dystopia is one of my favorite genres, even though I don't read it that much. I sort of have to be in the right mindset for them because they can be a little bit challenging to read. And I don't mean challenging in like actually reading the text, but they have a lot of challenging ideas to them often, and sometimes I'm not like capable of really taking it in, but I think that challenge is one of the reasons why these kinds of books tend to stick with me. Of course, I have to start with 1984 by George Orwell, which is like the defining dystopian books, or one of them. And every time I talk about this book, I feel like I say the same thing, but when I read this, it really opened my eyes and made me understand and think about some concepts that I had never really understood or thought about in depth. And I think understanding those concepts, like, it's really done a lot for me. And it's one of those books that I do kind of feel like everyone should read. Not every book is for everyone, but like, this is a very important book, and it's still, sadly, very important and very relevant. I think about this book like weekly, and some of the things that, or like the concepts that are brought up in this book, I think about all the time. Another classic within the dystopian world is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which I think is excellent. I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, which is one of my favorites. And then Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Basterica, but just have to note, do not read this if you are sensitive to what this book is about, because it is like very, very intense. Like, this is one of the sort of like best and worst books that I've ever read. More in the post-apocalyptic realm, we have The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham, and then we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, which is historical fiction, but it has like a time travel element to it. And I think maybe the thing that I like so much about these kinds of books, especially like dystopia, science fiction, like post-apocalyptic, those kinds of books, I think I just find it very interesting when people try to survive difficult or impossible circumstances. And I just think reading about different kinds of societies and what happens to society or people in very difficult and different circumstances, I just think it's very interesting, and it's one of those things that just sticks in my mind. Then at the end we have one that I just had to throw in here. It's books that are just a good time. And I wanted to include this because this is also a significant portion of the books that I read and the books that I give 5 stars to. I really need to balance my reading. As you might be able to tell by the other books that I've mentioned, a lot of them lean like heavier and darker, and there's a lot of like dark themes and disturbing stuff in a lot of the books that I love, and I just feel like sometimes I need to balance it out and I need to read something that is just entertaining and fun. I feel like a lot of these other books turn my brain really on, and then sometimes I have to switch it off a little bit and just read something else. That doesn't mean it can be mindless, but it just needs to be like a good time. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman is a great example of this for me. This is cozy and fun, but again, it has characters that you care about, or at least that I care about, which is very important. But this is like just so much fun to read. Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson is another great example. This is also, again, more in that like adventure, like great characters kind of vibe, but this is like kind of over the top and just like pure entertainment. And then The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich, which is a graphic novel. And again, this has like, it's not mindless, but it's just so much fun. I actually also want to mention a nonfiction book for this. It's Crazy for Birds by Misha Mayernick Blaze. And this is an illustrated book all about birds and different bird facts. And I realize this may be like a little bit of a niche interest, but I really feel like this fits very well into this because it made me feel relaxed and entertained, but also it wasn't completely mindless, and then the illustrations are just a treat, and it was a nice little bird break from all of these other dark books that I keep reading. Like I mentioned though, sometimes I do read a book, like some of my 5-star ratings are also books that don't fit into any of this, and like don't fit into any, I can't see any pattern to why I loved that book really. And to make it more complicated as well, sometimes I read books that fit perfectly into these things and I don't end up liking them. So sometimes it's just like a feeling in the moment, I think, but in general, I would say that these secret ingredients usually work very well for me. Now, I would of course love to know what your secret ingredients to a 5-star rating is. Tell me all about it in the comments. I'm sure I'm gonna read some of those comments and be like, oh, that should have been on my list as well, because there should be a lot on my list actually, because I just read so many different things and I'm just all over the place and I just want to read everything all the time. But yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. That was kind of it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was a little bit different. And as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!